Order, please. Before we begin the daily routine, the subject for this evening's late debate was submitted by the honourable member for Guysborough Sheet Harbour. Be resolved, the members of this House recognize this government's commitment to improving highway and road infrastructure in Guysborough Sheet Harbour and all along the Marine Drive. Be debated this evening at 6 p.m. Begin the daily routine presenting reading petitions. Order, please. Presenting reading petitions. Presenting reports of committees. Tabling reports, regulations, and other papers. Statements by ministers. Government notice of motion. The Honourable Minister of Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the parishioners and leadership of St. Joseph's Roman Catholic Church in North Sydney are celebrating their sesquicentennial year, highlighted by a liturgy today, led by the Bishop of the Antigonish Diocese, the Most Reverend Raymond J. Leahy. And whereas after 150 years, the congregation continues to be very active and integral to the life and work of the community and has concluded a major capital upgrade of St. Joseph's, further enhancing their physical presence in North Sydney for well into the future. And whereas Parish Priest Father Tom McNeil, the Sesquicentennial Committee, and all parishioners have marked this momentous occasion with a year of events and celebrations that reflect on their past, yet has affirmed for them a strong future. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House congratulate St. Joseph's Parish on their 150th anniversary and wish them every success as they continue to serve God and community. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Mr. Waiver, is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the head of the RCMP in Nova Scotia, Assistant Commissioner Dwight Bishop, has announced he will retire as Commanding Officer H Division after an exemplary career. And whereas Assistant Commissioner Bishop has served the force and communities throughout Nova Scotia with distinction. And whereas his leadership and management style were instrumental in providing effective policing service across our province. Therefore, it be resolved that this House express its deep gratitude to Assistant Commissioner Dwight Bishop for his excellent leadership and wish him well in his future endeavours. Mr. Speaker, I seek waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Mr. Waiver, is it agreed? All in favour say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the normal flu season in Nova Scotia runs from November to April and sends more than 20,000 people to their doctors, and whereas a flu shot protects the health of seniors and people with chronic illnesses and helps to decrease the tremendous impact influenza has on Nova Scotians every winter, and whereas flu shots are available free for numerous groups of people, including those over the age of 65, people with chronic illnesses, healthcare workers, and those who provide care in community-based offices. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of the House recognize the efforts of our district health authorities in launching their flu campaigns and urge Nova Scotians to get out and get their flu shot. Mr. Speaker, I seek waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Mr. Waiver, is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Tourism and Culture.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Richmond County has taken a big and important step in expanding its tourism market by establishing a new county-wide tourism marketing cooperative. And whereas Destination Richmond Tourism Cooperative is a newly formed marketing cooperative that will work in partnership with the municipality of Richmond for marketing product development. And whereas this newly organized cooperative is the result of much hard work and is currently signing up members, the first of whom was St. Peter's businessman Mac McIsaac, who was also instrumental in the development of the co-op. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of this House commend those whose hard work and forward thinking has led to the formation of Destination Richmond County, establishing one strong tourism association which will encourage and grow tourism across Richmond County. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Mr. Waiver, is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Economic Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, before I read my resolution, I apologize for not inquiring after yourself on how you enjoyed the Thanksgiving weekend. I missed that yesterday, so I hope you and your family did enjoy your Thanksgiving weekend and that you chose the other white meat, turkey, to celebrate. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas this year marks the 75th anniversary of the Pot of Gold brand of chocolates, which is made and manufactured in Dartmouth. And whereas Hershey Canada has undergone a $20 million expansion to their Moyers plant here in Nova Scotia, and whereas the Moyers name, recognized as an icon here in Nova Scotia, across Canada, North America, employs more than 900 Nova Scotians. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House congratulate Hershey's Canada and the Moyers plant on their success and thank them for their delicious chocolates as well as their dedication to Nova Scotia's employment situation. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I respectfully request a waiver of notice.
Agreed. All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Business Leadership Network is an employer-led initiative that brings that business community together with people with disabilities to uncover this hidden labor force. And whereas the Business Leadership Network works to provide low-cost, high-impact services that meet the needs of employers by promoting the best practices and giving employers ideas about things they can do differently to improve hiring results for people with disabilities. And whereas the Business Leadership Network provides training and on-site technical support to enhance recruitment, hiring, training, and supports for new employees and retention strategies to help companies retain existing workers who became disabled. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of this House commend the dedicated individuals at the Business Leadership Network for the wonderful work they do for and with members of the disability community and wish them well as they continue in their endeavors. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver.
Question for waiver is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Dartmouth South Portland Valley on an introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It gives me great pleasure to introduce two friends who are sitting in the West Gallery, Kathy Rothwell from Ottawa and Kathy Swenson from Halifax Citadel. And I ask the Legislative Assembly to greet them warmly.
Certainly welcome our guests to the gallery today and hope they enjoy the proceedings. The Honourable Minister of Education on a resolution.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Greater Halifax Dartmouth YMCA Newcomer Services Program is one of 10 organizations across Canada receiving the Citation for Citizenship this week, which is Canada's Citizenship Week, for its work in schools and its host program. Whereas the Citation for Citizenship is presented to exemplary Canadians and organizations in recognition of their outstanding contributions in assisting new residents to successfully integrate into Canada. And whereas through the Provincial Skills Agenda, Nova Scotia is committed to increasing the number of immigrants attracted to live and work in our province and ease their transition into a new country, therefore be resolved that all members of this House congratulate the Greater Halifax Dartmouth YMCA Newcomer Services Program on receiving a Citation for Citizenship Award and take pride in this Nova Scotian success. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice.
Question for waiver is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas this week the Atlantic Women in Law Enforcement Association is holding its annual conference in Truro. And whereas this organization works diligently to promote the interests of women who help maintain law and order in our communities. And whereas this week's conference will help promote continued excellence in the profession. Therefore, be it resolved that this House congratulate the members of the Atlantic Women in Law Enforcement Association for their contribution to safe communities in our region. Mr. Speaker, I seek waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question for waiver is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. Introduction to bills. The Honourable Member for Cape Breton West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce an act to amend Chapter 293 of the Revised Statutes of 1989, the Motor Vehicle Act.
The honourable member for Cape Breton West begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 293 of the revised statutes 1989, the Motor Vehicle Act.
Thanks. Bill 19, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 293 of the revised statutes 1989, the Motor Vehicle Act.
Or this bill be read a second time at a future date. Notice of motion. The honourable leader of the official opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Dartmouth Moosehead Dry captured the 2003 Nova Scotia Senior Baseball League Championship with a decisive 12-4 victory in Game 7 over the Truro Bearcats. And whereas with the victory, Dartmouth captured its record 10th Nova Scotia Senior Baseball League title and will now represent Nova Scotia at the 2004 Canadian Senior Men's National Championship to be held next summer in Moncton, New Brunswick. And whereas Dartmouth received outstanding contributions from all its players, coaches, and volunteers, including playoff MVP Jason Bailey, who pitched two complete game wins over Truro. Therefore, be it resolved that this House offers its congratulations to the Dartmouth Moosehead Dry players, coach Darren Doucette, volunteers, and fans for another outstanding season and for continuing to consistently field one of the finest senior baseball teams in Canada. Mr. Speaker, I would request waiver and passage without debate.
Request for waivers, is agreed? All those in favour say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Preston.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas North Preston's Kurt Johnson and Ukraine's Vatil Hitchko agreed yesterday to a 12-round heavyweight boxing match to take place in New York's Madison Square Gardens on December the 6th, 2003. And whereas the 31-year-old Kurt Johnson, with a 34 wins, 1 tie, and 1 loss, with 25 knockout record, is among the top boxing heavyweights in the world. And whereas boxing promoters hope to get Johnson and Hitchko bout sanctioned as a heavyweight eliminator match with the winner guaranteed a title shot against the current WBC title holder, Lennox Lewis. Therefore, be resolved that all members of this House extend encouragement to North Preston's Kurt Johnson, who without a doubt has distinguished himself as an established athlete as he trains for this important boxing event. Mr. Speaker, I'd ask for waiver and passage without debate.
Request for waivers, is agreed? All those in favour say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Chester St. Margaret's.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future date I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas equalization is a program guaranteed to Nova Scotians and all Canadians, and whereas this government has maintained a consistent commitment to the people of Nova Scotia to fight for adequate funding for this country's equalization program from the federal government, and whereas members of the third party failed to endorse a government motion in support of our finance minister going to Ottawa on behalf of all Canadians, yet they say they believe they should be in increases in equalization funding. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of the third party clarify their position on equalization so that all Nova Scotians will fully understand where the loyalties of the members of the third party lie. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice.
Request for waiver. Here are several noes. Notice is tabled. The honourable member for Dartmouth East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas we have just witnessed how, in a matter of hours, people with the same goal in mind can raise over $1 million for a good cause. And whereas there are many men, women, and children that are still suffering due to the effects of Hurricane Juan, and whereas it is so easy in today's fast-paced world to move on to the next issue, therefore be it resolved that this House slow down and remember that many people are still in urgent need of assistance and that they could also use a fundraising event that raises over $1 million. And Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver and passage without debate.
Waivers are agreed. Here are no. Noes is tabled. The honourable member for Cape Breton South.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Gary Corsano was recently appointed to the Board of Directors for Enterprise Cape Breton Corporation, whereas Mr. Corsano has been a partner in the law firm of Sampson McDougall since 1991, and practices in the area of civil litigation, business, employment and labor, health, oil and gas, administrative and Aboriginal law. And whereas Mr. Corsano was a graduate of Gonzaga University, Dalhousie University, and the University of New Brunswick, therefore be it resolved that all members of this House congratulate Gary Corsano on his recent appointment to the ECBC Board of Directors. I would ask for a waiver, Mr. Chair.
Request for waiver, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. Order, please. The Honourable Member for Kings North.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Kentville Police Chief Brian McLean will retire at the end of this month after 36 years of policing. And whereas Chief McLean began his police career as a member of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police and for a time was the head of the Windsor Detachment of the RCMP. And whereas since accepting the position of Kentville Chief of Police in 1997, Chief McLean has made significant inroads in ending the drug trade in the town, most notably a drug bust in 2001 that resulted in the arrest of 80 people and more than 300 charges being laid. Therefore be resolved that the members of this House join me in recognizing Kentville Police Chief Brian McLean for his many years of service and extend to him our best wishes in his retirement. I request waiver.
Request for waiver, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Halifax Atlantic.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Lady Baden-Powell Award is the highest award a Girl Guide can receive, and whereas it is awarded to the guide who best demonstrates outstanding dedication to the guiding movement and makes a contribution to community service, and whereas Cassie Gilkey, Girl Guide with the first Sambro Guides, has received the Lady Baden-Powell Award, therefore be it resolved that members of the House recognize and congratulate Cassie Gilkey on being awarded this award and for her commitment to her unit and the community she serves. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waiver, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Cape Breton West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Metro Cape Breton Junior Chamber of Commerce made quite an impression on its counterparts across Canada, garnering 8 awards at a national convention, and whereas 3 members of the local junior chamber, chapter president Carla Boudreau, executive director Wanda Jarrett, and chair Chris Holland participated in the junior chamber national convention this last weekend of September in Chatham, Ontario. And whereas the Metro Chamber Junior Chamber, the Metro Cape Breton Junior Chamber was formed in 2001 and is a nonprofit organization of young leaders and entrepreneurs between the ages of 19 and 39. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House congratulate Carla Boudreau, Wanda Jarrett, and Chris Holland for their success at this year's Junior Chamber National Convention. And Mr. Speaker, I would ask for a waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question for waiver, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Human Resources.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Nova Scotia Family Literacy Program will be unveiling their Read to Me program to the South Shore of Nova Scotia on November 5th at the South Shore Regional Hospital in Bridgewater. And whereas the Read to Me program is a creative tool designed to provide new parents with books and information on the importance of reading to children, with this eventual goal being the provision of books to all 10,000 babies born in Nova Scotia each year. And whereas being able to read is not something everyone should take for granted, and Education Minister Jamie Muir and all government recognize that as we introduce the first elementary literacy assessment for all grade 6 students, which measures reading and writing skills for these students, while also identify the struggling students who can be given more support. Therefore, be it resolved, MLAs recognize the tremendous contribution being made to society by Nova Scotia's Family Literacy Program and wish them continued success with their Read to Me program. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice.
Request for waiver, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Dartmouth North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Canadian Armed Forces base of Shannon Park, which overlooks the beautiful Halifax Harbour in the Bedford Basin, has formerly closed, and whereas this base now has a large number of vacant residential units, all of which had major renovations less than 10 years ago. And whereas the Minister of Housing is very much aware of the housing crisis in the metro area, particularly for seniors and low-income families. Therefore, be it resolved that the Minister responsible for housing liaise with the Department of National Defence, the Canada Lands Company, or other appropriate federal agencies with the intent to acquire these residential units for seniors and low-income families. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver and passage without debate.
Question for waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Kings West.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Dalhousie University students will join other university students across Canada in signing their name and their state their expected graduation debt on individual bricks as part of a visual message in Ottawa describing the student debt situation in Canada. And whereas as long as Nova Scotia students continue to pay the highest tuition in the country, they will undoubtedly continue to struggle with their finances. And whereas while the bricks may temporarily serve as an example of the barriers facing post-secondary education students in Canada, it is important that the Ham government remember its permanent commitment to help Nova Scotia students. Therefore, be it resolved that the Ham government help Nova Scotia students in tackling their wall of debt by continuing to address student assistance needs with the proper financial support. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question for waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Williams Point resident Stan Chapman has fostered the musical talents of many of this province's finest young fiddlers. And whereas Natalie McMaster, Ashley McIsaac, Kendra McGilvery, Mari Rankin, Wendy McIsaac, Jackie Dunn McIsaac, and this province's Minister of Tourism and Culture, Rodney MacDonald, are just some of the hundreds of students who have benefited from Mr. Chapman's teaching. And whereas this week the Celtic Colours Music Festival at the Cape Breton Fiddlers Association recognized Mr. Chapman with a concert in his honor, with many of his famous former students performing. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of this House join me in recognizing Stan Chapman for his many years of instilling the love of music into hundreds of this province's students, and thank him for his efforts which has helped create a generation of successful fiddlers and kept the tradition of Cape Breton fiddle music alive and well. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question for waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Timberlea Prospect.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas today, Wednesday, October 15th, is the 80th birthday of Frances Eisner of Lakeside. Whereas Mrs. Eisner is a faithful viewer of the Nova Scotia Legislative Television. And whereas Frances...
Order, please. The Honourable Member Timberlea Prospect has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, Big Bad Bill is Sweet William now. Whereas Frances' advice and opinions are always welcomed by her MLA. Therefore, be it resolved that the Nova Scotia Legislature wish Frances Eisner a happy 80th birthday with best wishes for many more birthday celebrations in the future. I ask for waiver and passage without debate, Mr. Speaker.
Request for waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Annapolis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Brandia Balcom was awarded with the Duke of Edinburgh Award, known internationally as the International Award for Young People, and whereas this award is designed to help young people develop a sense of responsibility in themselves and their community by expanding their horizons, and whereas Brandia is active in her community, has spent time teaching elementary children skipping routines, plays volleyball and the saxophone. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House congratulate Brandia Balcom for being a recipient of this year's Duke of Edinburgh Award. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas a growing demand for skilled certified tradespeople has given the vocational programs at Memorial High School added respect in recent years, whereas there are 11 vocational programs at Memorial with more than 300 students registered in these programs and many more students are on waiting lists, and whereas these practical programs give students as much as 1,000 hours towards their first block of their apprenticeship program, therefore be it resolved that members of this House recognize the instructors of Memorial High School's vocational programs for their dedication to prepare students to take advantage of the many growing employment opportunities and trades across Nova Scotia. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Contrary minded, nay. Motion is carried. Orders today or questions put by members. Question period begin at 2:33 and end at 4:03. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Minister of Health. Yesterday, the Minister indicated that he would solve the overcrowding at the Valley Regional Hospital by looking for long-term care beds. Now, Mr. Speaker, it is odd that this government would look to long-term care beds as a solution when, after all, it is their financial assessment process that has clogged hospital beds with long-term care patients in the first place. So I want to ask the Minister of Health, will he table in this House information on how many patients are in Valley hospitals waiting for long-term care beds?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I disagree with the premise of the honourable member's question, but I will endeavour to provide the information he has requested.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your first supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, if the minister is worried about where he's going to find long-term care beds, I can tell him where he can find 10 beds just like that. In 2002, Mountain Lee Lodge in Bridgetown cut 6 beds because it couldn't fill them. At the same time, North Hills Nursing Home in Granville Ferry closed 4 beds due to its high vacancy rate. Meanwhile, beds at the Valley Regional and Soldiers Memorial Hospital are filled up with people who are going through the financial assessment process. My question for the minister is this: why are patients in the Valley staying in hospitals while nursing home beds are closing because of vacancies?
Good question. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And every effort is being made to find appropriate nursing home care beds for patients that are in acute care situations in the Valley. And that process is ongoing, and there's progress being made with respect to it.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the minister is ignoring the problem and he's trying to ignore the answer. The Department of Health has sat idly by while nursing home beds close in the Valley and desperately needed hospital beds are full. All because they refuse to end the financial assessment under the single entry access. Mr. Speaker, I'll ask the minister through you, when will he admit that his government has created the bed shortage in the Valley and now they're struggling to clean up the mess?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, I can say to the House and to you to the House through you that this province, through its single entry access system, is the envy of the country, and it is a leader in the country. And Mr. Speaker, it is second to none. And officials from my department are making presentations to national organizations, and they are looked up to with respect to the single entry process. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Finance. On September 19th, 2003, the Minister of Finance provided Nova Scotians with information that suggested that we have a $32 million shortfall. But he went on to pretend that the books were indeed balanced nonetheless. Yesterday, it was made clear that we have a $22 million additional problem on top of that shortfall. My question to the minister is, will the minister admit what is obvious, that the books of this province are not balanced to the tune of $54 million? The
Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And the honourable member is quite right. In the fiscal update, we indicated we were reducing, lowering our forecast for our revenue estimates. and we indicated we were going to move on a management plan that would achieve a $32 million reduction to work our way through to the end of the year to balance the budget. Mr. Speaker, there is a lot of unforeseen events happen in the course of a budget year, and we are working with all of them.
The Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, on September 19th, the Minister of Finance had a plan. My question to the Minister of Finance is, do you have a plan for the new $22 million?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And our plan is, as I indicated to this House before, there are unforeseen events come along. We had anticipated reduced revenues. We took an action to adjust our expenses to meet that revenue picture that we had. Mr. Speaker, there is a lot of unforeseen events come along, and we have to deal with them as a government. We have to be prudent managers, as of what Nova Scotians expect us to do.
The Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party in your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, what's most important is that it is done in a timely fashion. Now we have $54 million worth of cuts to be done over 6 months. That's the equivalent of $108 million if it were spread over the entire year. Isn't it about time, Mr. Minister, to revise your original plan of $32 million to make sure that we are providing the cuts for the full $54 million worth?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And the honourable member is presenting a number to the House as if it's an actual number, as if there's a $54 million. We are dealing with a $32 million. We are dealing with other factors that are around here, Mr. Speaker, and we will be bringing a plan forward to deal with those as we have started.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the single entry access program in this province has been used as an excuse to systematically strip seniors of almost everything they own to pay for health care, Mr. Speaker, as if that isn't bad enough. A resident of a Sydney area nursing home with Alzheimer's was recently moved to a private room. Her family was shocked to learn that her personal use allowance was being charged $1.50 a day for the private room, Mr. Speaker. My question to the Minister of Health, through you, is why are the facilities allowed to take the cost of care out of a resident's tiny personal use allowance?
Good question.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And the situation, Mr. Speaker, with respect to the single entry access is one which is improving the situation relative to the delivery of health care in this province, and it will continue to do so. That's not to say, Mr. Speaker, that as has been evidenced in the last question period and today, that members opposite will not find additional places for us to spend money. In yesterday's question period alone, they managed to find $58.5 million of expenditures that we should make, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the minister is trying to defend the unconscionable, which is the taking of people's assets to pay for health care. Mr. Speaker, this poor resident gets $105 a month. $105 a month to pay for her clothing, hygiene items, and other extras such as haircuts. Her family was told if they wanted to keep her account at $105 a month, they would be billed alternatively for the private room. Most of the rooms in the newer facility are private, Mr. Speaker, so I ask the minister, why is a nursing home being allowed to fleece residents out of $1.50 a day from their already meager monthly personal care allowance?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And through you to the House, I want to say that the single entry access is not in any way related to what the honourable member is referring to, Mr. Speaker. And we have, in fact, improved the situation of seniors in this province very considerably since we assumed office, both in the area of pharmacare, in the area of assistance and taxes. And, Mr. Speaker, we have one of the best systems in this country, Mr. Speaker, and it's second to none.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your final supplementary.
Debatable.
Mr. Speaker, the minister knows that they have in fact raised pharmacare fees. They have systematically stripped seniors of their dignity, trying to get into long-term care facilities. This government should be ashamed of the way they've treated seniors, not bragging about it. Nursing home residents aren't allowed to buy Christmas presents with their $105 a month, but this government allows a nursing home to use that money for something that's already paid for. Heavily, I might add, with per diem rates. So, Mr. Speaker, I ask the Minister of Health, when will your department stop favoring nursing homes and start looking after the vulnerable residents who must live in them?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and all members of this House would recognize that we have in fact embarked upon a program of relieving all seniors of health care costs, and we will do that, and we're implementing it gradually over a period of the next few years. And that, Mr. Speaker, is real action on the part of this government in order to provide relief and assistance to seniors of this province.
The Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Finance. Mr. Minister, have you discussed with your officials, or have your officials discussed with Ottawa officials, the possibility of cancelling the tax cuts set for January 1st, 2003?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. No.
The Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party, and your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition last week suggested that the tax cut was a done deal for January 1st. I'd like to provide the House with a letter dated April 22nd, 2003 once again. The letter is from John Manley, and it outlines the specifics of when this tax cut could be cancelled. He said, to implement a change in the provincial tax rate effective January 1st, the federal government requires notice as of October 15th of the year previous. Mr. Speaker, as you know, this is October 15th. My question is to the Minister of Finance. Mr. Minister, will you at least defer for 1 year the tax cut that is proposed for January 1st?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And perhaps what the honourable member, as he talks about that question, maybe he should take the opportunity to go look at the latest statistics that the Canadian Federation of Small Business. Let me quote, Mr. Speaker. 75% of small business in Nova Scotia indicate the 10% reduction will be a benefit to business. Mr. Speaker, that's what we brought this forward for, and the small business people recognize it.
The Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party, and your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Finance can avoid the questions all he wants, but later today, as you know, we'll be speaking about autism and the challenges with people trying to receive a proper level of treatment for autism. We know about the challenges with respect to operating rooms. Last week, it was Rick Laird who had challenges with respect to his home care being cut off, and we also heard about Ann Irons and her problems with mammographs. Today, we're hearing from the NDP about seniors in nursing homes, but providing these services requires money. In the interests of Nova Scotians, my question to the Minister of Finance on this last day available is, will he cancel the tax cut?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And our plan is to implement the budget we brought forward in the spring, all of the implications of that. Our plan is to provide the additional monies for hospitals, for health care, and end the tax cut, which is all part of our plan. And, Mr. Speaker, we're moving forward with that.
The Honourable Member for Pictou West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And my question is to the Minister of Service, Nova Scotia, and Municipal Relations. As we speak, Mr. Speaker, municipal leaders from across the province are meeting in Yarmouth. They will be discussing a number of issues of importance to our diverse communities, including the mounting infrastructure deficit in the province. The most substantial pot of money to fund infrastructure needs is through the Canada-Nova Scotia Infrastructure Program. But the problem, Mr. Speaker, is that the UNSM doesn't even have a voting seat on the committee that makes the funding decisions. So my question through you to the Minister, since all parties are aware this is one of the UNSM's top issues of concern, will the Minister tell this House what action his government plans to take to address the situation?
The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia, and Municipal Relations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I would thank the honourable member for the opportunity to address
this House on this question. As the honourable member probably knows, that it will require both agreement of the municipalities, the province, and the federal government to allow for UNSM to have a seat on the committee. As I understand, the only province in Canada that allows that to happen is Alberta. We'll consider that in the future, and we've been discussing with UNSM ways in which we can accommodate their concerns. Thank you.
The honourable member for Pictou West on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And for the minister's information, there are actually 2 provinces in Canada that have the UNSM representatives on the provincial committee. And I'd like to table with the House, Mr. Speaker, information from the province of Manitoba, where they have 3 members of the Provincial Municipalities Association on the Infrastructure Committee, and also the province of Alberta, where representatives of both the Provincial and Urban Municipalities Association have seats on the committee. So my question, Mr. Speaker, is why don't we consider the voice of UNSM to be important enough to contribute to the decision-making on infrastructure funds such as other provinces do?
The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I wouldn't want to get into a dispute about the facts. I spoke to the minister and members of Manitoba Department as well. And it's my understanding that they have ex officio status, as well as so do other provinces, and so does the UNSM. But I will say this, is that it's a worthwhile endeavor that the UNSM has brought to my attention. We'll consider it carefully. We'll try to work with them and with the federal partners to determine whether or not there is a way or an approach that we can accommodate them. So.
Hear, hear. Now, member for Pictou West on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The UNSM, through their management committee, needs a voice now on the provincial infrastructure committee. So my question is, when, Mr. Minister, will that promise be met?
The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Well, again, Mr. Speaker, I thank the member for bringing the problem forward, the question forward. It does provide me with an opportunity to say that over 4 weeks ago, I met with the executive of the UNSM to discuss this and other matters. As I indicated earlier in response to the member, that it's not just the province's decision, that it requires the federal government to decide as well. And as I said earlier in both responses, that we will work with the UNSM as well as our federal partner to see if there's a way that we can accommodate the UNSM to be a meaningful partner in that business relationship. So when, I can't tell you. It's up to the federal government. Thank you.
The honourable member for Glace Bay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Health. Mr. Speaker, we're all reading with great interest of the delays in surgery at the QE2 as a result of Hurricane Juan. Mr. Speaker, wait times are a problem that we've been pointing out to the government over the last couple of years, and it would appear, Mr. Speaker, that the government could solve the problem if it so chooses. For instance, government could take a serious look at surgeries being significantly impacted and see if there are other districts who could somehow assist with the backlogs. But, Mr. Speaker, there's one catch. It would require government to provide dollars to cover the additional surgeries, dollars they say they currently don't have. My question, Mr. Speaker, for the minister is, why does he feel it's more important for government to move ahead with a tax scheme instead of helping Nova Scotians who are currently languishing on wait lists?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I can tell the honourable member that the situation which he proposes is one which has in fact been addressed by the Capital Health Authority, and the difficulty in implementing that solution is nothing to do with funding, but rather it is very much related to the fact that the Health Authority, the Capital Health Authority, and the surgeries that it performs are very much tertiary related surgeries, and the outlying the other health authorities in the province lack the capacity to be able to perform those surgeries. Many of them, in fact, require specialized operating theaters which don't exist in other health authorities. So the option which the honourable member referenced is, in fact, one which has been explored. It is found not to be one which will provide the kind of relief that is required.
The honourable member for Glace Bay in your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the minister's words will be cool comfort to those who are waiting and impacted again by wait lists because of Hurricane Juan. Also, there'll be cool comfort to people like Mr. Tom Weller of Halifax, who we told you last week was waiting for 18 months for back surgery. Mr. Speaker, the minister has commented publicly that there is a wait time committee that's working on a plan to address the issue, yet we can be almost certain there's going to be a price tag associated with that and their recommendations too. So, Mr. Speaker, my question to the minister is, wouldn't the minister agree that the government is being short-sighted in moving ahead with next year's $147 million tax scheme when it's clear that financial resources will be needed in order to provide care for those who are currently on wait lists?
Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, I can say to the House and to all Nova Scotians that we indeed are very, very concerned about those Nova Scotians who have been inconvenienced and whose health is a large question mark in their minds as a result of the devastation of the hurricane. That is something that is of great concern to all of us, and it is something that we are addressing on a continuing basis. But I can also say to the honourable member, Mr. Speaker, that this government has year over year put additional funding into health care delivery in this province. We will continue to do that, and as the need presents itself, we will address those needs, and reducing wait times will be one of the priorities of this government.
The honourable member for Glace Bay, and your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the point I'm trying to make to the minister is better access to health care in a more timely fashion, or a tax cut. That's the burden that this government has to carry. And a couple of weeks ago, Mr. Speaker, Teresa Metherall of Halifax commented publicly about being told she'd have to wait in the ER for 10.5 hours and then left without being seen. Mr. Speaker, it's been the Liberal Party that suggested such things as opening the Cobequid Multi-Service Centre 24 hours a day to eliminate the pressure. My question to the minister is, again, why is the minister so intent on moving ahead with a tax scheme when it's clear that opening the Cobequid Centre on a 24-hour basis would assist in eliminating a long ER wait list that Teresa Metherall and others are currently enduring?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I can say to the honourable member through you that indeed one of the challenges we faced as a government is to catch up and to bring back the level of service that existed when they cut the 1,500 beds. And that, Mr. Speaker, has been one of the most significant challenges that we've had. And, Mr. Speaker, we are meeting that challenge. We're moving forward, and indeed we will address the wait time situation in this province because we continue to put additional money into health care.
Order, please. Order, please. The questions and the answers are getting too long. I'm going to start to cut members off. The honourable member for Halifax Atlantic.
Mr. Speaker, my question for you is for the Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations. As you know, the Union of Nova Scotia Municipalities is meeting right now in Yarmouth, and its lobbying efforts have concentrated on several key issues. One of these is the fact that Nova Scotia Power is exempt from paying municipal property taxes directly to the municipal unit wherein it has property. Municipalities believe that those taxes should be based on an assessment of real property belonging to Nova Scotia Power within each unit's boundaries. What will your government do to ensure that municipalities do receive the tax revenues they are entitled to from profitable private corporations like Nova Scotia Power?
Good question.
The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Mr. Speaker, thank the member for bringing the issue forward. Since being named Minister responsible for Service Nova Scotia Municipal Relations, I've taken the time to visit some 60% of Nova Scotia's population municipal councils. As well, I also met with the executive of the UNSM and the president of the UNSM. This issue is something that they brought to my attention, and we will continue to work with the UNSM to ensure that their issues are addressed in a fair and appropriate way.
The member for Halifax Atlantic on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the issue is actually growing worse rather than better. Nova Scotia municipalities are particularly cash-strapped in the wake of Hurricane Juan. We realize that the grant has increased somewhat, paid by Nova Scotia Power, but when will it be brought to parity?
The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I would disagree with the member opposite that the municipality's situation has actually improved over the last number of years. Growth in assessment has shown that each and every municipality's revenue has increased year over year, with a few small exceptions, Mr. Speaker. So I will say that, Mr. Speaker, that we will work closely with the municipalities to ensure that their issues are addressed, such as I have over the last 4 weeks, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Halifax Atlantic on your final supplementary.
I'm afraid the main word I could hear was small, but in any case, any change in the current arrangement would have to be phased in, and we certainly agree with that much, but that's not an excuse to continue inaction or planning. So could you give a timeline when the government will be able to ensure that Nova Scotia Power pays the municipalities of this province the property taxes to which they are entitled?
Minister of Service, Nova Scotia, Municipal Relations.
Mr. Speaker, I would remind the member opposite that this government was the government that increased the amount of property taxes that Nova Scotia Power would pay all municipalities, and it provided millions of dollars of tax revenue for municipalities that they otherwise didn't have, Mr. Speaker. And I would also remind the member opposite that I've made several commitments during my time out as minister to deal with the assessment issue with Nova Scotia Power, and our department is working on that file now. So thank you.
The honourable member for Cape Breton South.
Mr. Speaker, my question today is to the minister responsible for the Treasury and Policy Board. Mr. Speaker, yesterday I asked the minister to table a list of critical issues, including a specific paper prepared by a senior corporate policy analyst with the Treasury and Policy Board. I referenced at the time that we submitted a Freedom of Information request, but I wanted to give the minister a chance to table the information. Mr. Speaker, when the minister replied, he referenced a meeting that took place, but at no time did I mention a meeting in my question yesterday. Mr. Speaker, my question to the minister: could the minister tell the House who was in attendance at the meeting held on October 6, 2003, including deputy ministers and any members of the Premier's office staff, if indeed that is the meeting he was referring to?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the honourable member should understand that meetings happen routinely in government. It is a routine function of government that public servants get together to discuss policy options for government. The composition of those meetings is not the issue, Mr. Speaker. The issue for the public is the decision that government takes. That's what I'm here to defend, Mr. Speaker, and that's what I do defend.
The honourable member for Cape Breton South on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, it is an issue of government. It's an issue of the finances of the province of Nova Scotia, and as such, it should be made public as to exactly what went on at that meeting and what we're talking about with finances here in this province. It is an issue, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wish to table our FOI so that the minister can refresh himself as to the contents. He must have known, because the FOI references a meeting held on October 26, 2003, a meeting which Jamie Bailey attended. While the rest of the province, Mr. Speaker, probably because Jamie Bailey's probably running the show over there, and not you, Mr. Minister. That's why.
Order, please. Order, please. The honourable member for Cape Breton South on this
Mr.
first
Speaker,
supplementary.
while the rest of the province was dealing with the Hurricane Juan, the Treasury and Policy Board were dealing with a pending financial disaster that's about to happen in this province. So my question again is to the minister: will you table the documents I requested today instead of trying to delay via the Freedom of Information Act?
The honourable Minister of Justice.
Again, I thank the honourable member for the question. Obviously, the honourable member has forgotten since his days in government that it is ministers who are responsible to make decisions, not public servants. Perhaps, Mr. Speaker, if he had remained acquainted with that principle, he might still be here and not over there.
The honourable member for Cape Breton South on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the rate that government is going, it won't be long before we're over there, I'll tell you that. Mr. Speaker, the document I'm referring to was not a cabinet document. It was a document tabled by senior civil servants outlining a pending financial disaster in this province. Now, I can't think of anything more important in this place today, that tabling information regarding the province's finances is a duty of that particular minister and his deputy ministers.
Order, please. The honourable member for Cape Breton South on his final supplementary.
Why won't you table those documents, Mr. Minister?
The honourable Minister of Justice.
Again, the honourable member is making assumptions about the content of that meeting, Mr. Speaker. Unless the honourable member was there, I'm not sure how he would know what the content of the meeting would be. And frankly, Mr. Speaker, the real issue here is the fact that it is the government's responsible for making policy decisions, and we stand by that process.
The honourable member for Halifax Needham.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question, Mr. Speaker, through you is for the Minister of Health. Mr. Speaker, parents of children with special needs are struggling to get by in this province. For children with autism, early treatment is critical, and it can make all the difference. Tracy and Gerard Avery have just learned that they will have to take a time out from treatment for their 3-year-old twin boys who have autism. Mr. Speaker, my question to the minister is this: how is your government addressing the shortage of treatment services for children diagnosed with autism?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, we in the department are in fact bringing together the best approach in dealing with this entire problem and the best methods of treatment relative to it. And I can tell the honourable member that we are making progress with that. We have, in fact, a new chair of autism has been appointed and is working very closely with us in this development. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable member Halifax Needham on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the truth of the matter is that treatment for children with autism is not a priority for this government. Resources are slim. So slim that parents are now being asked to agree to a time out for their children's treatment. That's in spite of the very small number of staff that were hired. Now, parents have heard that they are to receive 2 to 3 months of treatment and then to have 2 to 3 months without treatment. So, Mr. Speaker, parents like Tracy and Gerald Avery are being asked to sign a form, and I'm tabling it here, for a timeout with their speech pathologist. I'd like to ask the minister, treatment for children with autism is crucial in the early years. Will your government at least end this practice of time-out treatment?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We will continue to develop programs and the best practices that are available and looking at the international scene as well as the national scene to develop these programs and have them implemented, Mr. Speaker, so that the program that we do put in place will in fact be second to none anywhere.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Needham on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, it's hard to imagine that 3 months of treatment and then 3 months without treatment and 3 months back with treatment could ever be considered best practice, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there's no one in the world who can possibly think that this is a good thing to do. Now we've learned that there is a hiring freeze at the IWK that will make it even more difficult to address the shortage in children's services. So, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to ask the minister, when do you plan to address this shortage in resources for children with autism?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and we are, as I indicated in the previous answers, continuing to develop programs that will address the problems spoken about by the honourable member. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Halifax Needham.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My question again through you is to the Minister of Health. Mr. Speaker, services for children with special needs in this province is in dire shape. For children under 6, there is a 40% shortfall of speech-language pathologists in Nova Scotia. This means that many children are not even given an opportunity to improve their speech and communication skills. The most critical period of development is in childhood. Speech-language development is linked to literacy and academic achievement. So my question to the minister is this: when do you plan to address the shortage of speech pathologists in this province?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and we are we are working on addressing this problem on a continuous basis, and Mr. Speaker, we will be making progress. Thank you.
The honourable member for Halifax Needham on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, these answers are very vague indeed. Mr. Speaker, a 3-year-old boy in this province who can't talk can wait 18 months to 2 years for therapy, Mr. Speaker. That's the struggle Nova Scotians' hearing and speech clinic is being forced to deal with. Speech pathologists are desperately needed in this province, yet this government has refused to adequately address this need. So, Mr. Speaker, my question to the minister is this. Why won't your government do the right thing and make a commitment to significantly reduce wait times in the next 6 months?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I can tell the House through you that we indeed want to reduce wait times, and we're working in that direction, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Halifax Needham on your final supplementary.
But no commitment. The minister will not make a time commitment. Mr. Speaker, children with special needs are not getting the services they require. Children can wait up to 2 years to see a speech pathologist. A lack of services means that many children are disadvantaged probably for the remainder of their lives, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to ask the minister what it's going to take for his government to start investing in the children of this province.
Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And we indeed invest in the children of this province, and we will continue to find ways to invest even more in the children of this province, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Glace Bay.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Health. Last month, residents in the southwestern part of this province learned that obstetric services at the Yarmouth Regional Hospital will no longer be available on weekends. Mr. Speaker, for women in the area who happen to go into labour late Thursday or Friday, that means a 2-hour trip to either Kentville or Bridgewater. While temporary arrangements have been announced to provide service, those arrangements are far from permanent. So my question to the Minister, Mr. Speaker, what is your department doing to assist the Southwest Nova District Health Authority in recruiting obstetricians for the 2 vacancies in that region?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and we work very closely with the DHA in addressing that problem and other problems when shortages arise as a result of physicians moving and taking other responsibilities. That is an ongoing process, and we work very closely with the DHAs to fulfill those shortages when they occur.
The honourable member for Glace Bay on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, I'm sure, Mr. Speaker, that you and I would consider, and a lot of others, the situation in Yarmouth to be quite serious. But, Mr. Speaker, it would appear that the government is not all that anxious, really, to recruit obstetricians to Yarmouth. And that is given the fact that they haven't even bothered to list those positions on the government physician recruitment site, Mr. Speaker. So my question to the minister, could the minister please indicate whether that omission on the recruitment website has been done as a cost-saving measure on behalf of government?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, the addition to a few paragraphs on a website is hardly a cost-related issue. We, in fact, work very closely with the DHA, and there are some real challenges in terms of being able to address the issue of qualifications relative to people who want to come here and the qualifications that are recognized by the College of Physicians. And that, Mr. Speaker, is one of the challenges that faces us, and we need to work very closely with all involved in order to address that.
The honourable member for Glace Bay on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Irrespective of what the minister says, it is a cost factor, Mr. Speaker. If you don't advertise, then you can't recruit. And if you don't recruit, you don't have to worry about the costs, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, regardless of that, the people of Southwestern Region will find little comfort in the words of that minister. So my question to the minister, Mr. Speaker, could the minister please explain why a tax cut is more important than securing full-time obstetric services at the Yarmouth Regional Hospital as soon as possible.
Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It's quite a reach for the honourable member to suggest that somehow by reducing the number of obstetricians we in fact would alter the birth rate. That, Mr. Speaker, is so preposterous it's not worth commenting on.
The honourable member for Timberlea Prospect.
Thank you.
Order, please. Order, please. The honourable member for Timberlea Prospect has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Order, please. The honourable member for Timberlea Prospect.
Mr. Speaker, my question through you is to the minister responsible for EMO. Last evening in the Whites Lake Legion, I attended an emotionally charged community meeting with fishermen. These men and women expect help from this government in their time of need, and now they are confronted with the small business application form for disaster financial assistance. And I would like to table this for the attention of members. This is not a user-friendly form. It is certainly not a fisherman-friendly form. They are told that they need a letter from their insurance company, brackets, not their broker, confirming damages are not insurable and outlining reasons. They are told they need a business registration document issued by the Registry of Joint Stocks. And then they are told they need a certified accountant verifying the full-time manager is a 50% owner and derives 51% of his or her income from the business. Mr. Minister, this is no way to treat hard-working Nova Scotians. What are you prepared to do to assist these fishermen with these convoluted forms?
The honourable minister responsible for the Emergency Measures Organization.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And as the honourable member should be aware of, the federal auditors and the federal government require certain documentation. That being said, if the honourable member consults the pamphlet, he will see that 10 sites have been chosen in Nova Scotia to assist, and personnel will assist those fishermen, those farmers, those homeowners that qualify in filling that entire application form to facilitate them being able to receive relief.
The honourable member for Timberlea Prospect on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, my question will go to the Minister of Fisheries. Fishermen who have appeared at Access Nova Scotia are asked about deeds to property where their fish wharves used to be. They are now asked about building permits and that they will be necessary to rebuild these fish stores. They're advised to have pictures available before and after the hurricane. They are told to submit written estimates or paid invoices, and then, of course, they're told your application will be returned if it is not completed in full. Mr. Minister, these are hardworking people. They feel insulted with the bureaucratic red tape.
Question, please.
They freely admit they are not comfortable with paperwork. Mr. Minister, what are you prepared to do to assist these men and women?
The Honourable Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and understand that the process might be a bit difficult, and as we go along with this, we will try to streamline it as best we can. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Now, member Timberlea Prospect on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know what is needed, Mr. Speaker, are government officials on the ground, in the local halls, at the fire hall, at the Legion, making themselves available in the very communities most affected. Mr. Minister, you've seen the damage. These families are scrambling to get their lives together. They do not have time to appear at Access Nova Scotia during business hours. It is time, Mr. Minister, to take the government to the people. Are you prepared, Mr. Minister, and will you instruct your officials to set up meetings with individuals affected in the community halls, in the very communities that have been affected so severely by by Hurricane Juan?
The Honourable Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries. Sorry, the Honourable Minister responsible for EMO.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I know the honourable member shares the same concern as government members and all Nova Scotians do for victims of this disaster. And the honourable member obviously does want proper documentations and is concerned about many related issues. The reason we've ensured that qualified people are there to fill the application out and provide full assistance is because of the concerns of those fishermen, those people involved in the resource industry that want quick action and facilitate it. That's why people are there.
The honourable member for Cape Breton West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Community Services. Mr. Speaker, in May of this year, the government received a report from the coalition of the Transition House Association, Women's Centres Connect, and the Association for Men's Intervention Program. So my question to the Minister, could the Minister please indicate whether or not he has provided a formal response addressing each of the recommendations in this report and providing a timeline for implementation?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member for the question. Mr. Speaker, when the coalition submitted the report to the department, they asked that a response come in the fall, and we are on track to provide them a response this fall.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton West on your first supplementary.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. What the Minister has said is that he has, or no one in his department has responded to date. So, Mr. Speaker, I would also recall in reading the report, the Women's Centres Connect outlined a list of recommendations, and one such recommendation was for the department to support and fully fund Women's Centres core services, which were defined in the report. So my question to the Minister, why is this Minister comfortable in supporting a tax scheme when it's clear that his department could be doing much more to support women's centres in this province?
Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Mr. Speaker, thank the member for his question, and I would suggest that it might be appropriate to wait until we give an official response before we start speculating on what that response might be.
Honourable Member Cape Breton West on your final supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, what the Minister is saying is that wait and wait and continue to wait. Mr. Speaker, the crisis intervention, support counselling, advocacy, outreach, and community education, these are all services that this minister chose not to support in order to follow through with a tax scheme. And to do that, the minister, I say shame on you. Another recommendation in the report was to support and fully fund Tri-County Women's Centre in Yarmouth, something I'm sure the Honourable Minister of Natural Resources would like to see. So my question to the minister, through you, Mr. Speaker, is how will the minister explain to the women of Yarmouth that a tax scheme is more important than a fully funded Tri-County Women's Centre in Yarmouth?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And with reference to the member's question, I would suggest that this Women's Centre was brought about as a result of an HRDC grant. We did not commit coming in to continue to support the program. However, they did manage to get an extension from the federal grant, and we are funding them for the balance of the fiscal year once the grant runs out. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Halifax, Shabaka.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My question today is for the Minister responsible for the Emergency Measures Organization. Today, we hear of new storm warnings in Nova Scotia. Within hours, it is expected we will experience winds gusting up to 90 kilometres an hour on the mainland. In Cape Breton, the Highlands may see winds gusting up to 130 kilometres an hour, which is almost the sustained strength of Hurricane Juan. I will table...
Order, please. The Honourable Member for Halifax, Shabaka has the floor.
Thank you. I will table the Environment Canada's severe weather bulletin for today. To their credit, EMO has already issued a warning to Nova Scotians to be prepared. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, many Nova Scotians have been left vulnerable in the wake of Hurricane Juan. They are frustrated, they have received no provincial assistance, and the prospect of such help is not imminent. We know, Mr. Speaker, this is not likely to be the last severe weather storm of the season, and I wonder if the minister will now commit his government to immediate disaster relief funding with or without Ottawa?
The Honourable Minister responsible for the Emergency Measures Organization.
Thank you very much. And through you, Mr. Speaker, I want to commend the honourable member for noting and reading the weather forecast this week. It is an improvement over last week's concerns, but I also want to assure the member that if he will check the paper on Friday past, the province announced $10 million of its own for relief to Nova Scotia citizens already.
The member for Halifax-Shabukto on your first supplementary.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. That money that the minister refers to seems to be related purely to their share under the disaster financial assistance arrangements with Ottawa. One of the things I read in addition to the weather forecasts are news bulletins from the government of Prince Edward Island. Prince Edward Island has announced and recognized immediate needs and has delivered provincial aid on their own, separate from the federal program. So my question is, Mr. Speaker, what will it take for the people in Nova Scotia to get the same treatment from their government as those in PEI are receiving from their government?
The Honourable Minister responsible for the Emergency Measures Organization.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And if the honourable member does check the paper closely on last Friday, those $10 million are provincial dollars.
The Honourable Member for Halifax-Shabukto on your final supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I didn't say they weren't provincial dollars. I said that they weren't extra dollars. I should have tabled the news release I referred to about PEI, and I will. Mr. Speaker, there are many sayings about the virtues of being prepared, and I guarantee you that every Nova Scotian who needs some disaster assistance from the government right now is wishing they could be better prepared. Instead, they're pretty well left alone to batten down the hatches of their home or business to brace for another storm. Mr. Speaker, what will it take for this government to mitigate further losses and property damage by committing upfront aid out of their own money to storm-affected Nova Scotians?
Mr. Responsible for the Emergency Measures Organization.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And again, each and every one of those dollars in that $10 million announced last Friday are provincial dollars. I fail to see why the honourable member does not understand that.
The honourable member for Victoria-the Lakes.
Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Minister of Education. Mr. Speaker, this past September, representatives from the Department of Education had a meeting with people from the Strait Regional School Board. I believe, Mr. Speaker, the Deputy Minister of Education was present, along with the Superintendent of the Strait Regional School Board. My question to the Minister of Education is, what was the reason for this meeting, and if possible, would the Minister kindly let us know who else was in attendance?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, the officials from the department meet regularly with school boards, the Strait Region, the Halifax Region, the Chignecto Central. There are meetings that take place that are routine is probably not an appropriate term, but regular meetings that take place, and that meeting would fall into that category.
The Honourable Member for Victoria-the Lakes on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, one person that was present there was Lorraine Smith Collins, who is not an employee of any Mi'kmaq or any First Nations band in the province, as she is an employee of the Department of Education. Mr. Speaker, my question again to the Minister of Education is, Mr. Speaker, here is a letter that I have here that I intend to table, outlining to the people that this meeting and what it was they were meeting about. Mr. Speaker, under the Mi'kmaq Education Act, in 1998, it states that a community shall provide or make provision for the primary, elementary, and secondary education programs and services to all residents of its reserve. And I have the act here, Mr. Speaker, that I intend to table. Mr. Speaker, the people of Waikagama First Nation believe it was a violation of the Mi'kmaq Education Act not to have had representation at this meeting. And my question to the Minister is, why was this meeting carried out without representation from the Waikagama First Nations when you know you do not have that right?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, this was a regular meeting with representatives of the Strait School Board. Like all school boards in the province, there is a First Nations representative on that school board who I understand was present.
Now, member for Victoria Lakes on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the people of Waikagama First Nations are upset that decisions are being made without their input as required by law. The Minister of Education owes them an apology, Mr. Speaker. My question to the minister is, will the minister guarantee the people from Waikaba First Nations and the First Nations people of across Nova Scotia that they will not be ignored in the future when decisions are made concerning them and their children's education?
Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, the Department of Education, like other departments of government, consults people in decision-making or in discussions when their input is needed, warranted, or mandatory.
The honourable member for Dartmouth South, Portland Valley.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Community Services. Last year, the Department of Community Services spent tens of thousands of dollars on a failed attempt to computerize the intake process for its programs. Similar automation in other provinces has left people in need without access to a caseworker. In Ontario, for example, clients hit a wrong button and they are deemed ineligible without any immediate way of appealing the decision. The Department of Community Services has been very quiet about this plan. So through you, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister, where does computerizing the intake process stand today?
Now, Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the member opposite for the question. Yes, there was a look at contracting out some of the work in the department. That has not been done. We are using more internal resources to make better, take better advantage of the IT services that are available today, but we are not looking at going the route that was considered, I think it was a couple of years ago. So that's not currently on.
Now, member for Dartmouth South, Portland Valley, on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, a tender was put out on September 4th for a vendor consultation process to identify companies that might be interested in delivering computer services for community services. This computerized intake cuts money for the department, but at what human cost? People who need help don't get it, and that price is too high. So, Mr. Speaker, the Department of Community Services is asking families on social assistance to use HST checks to replace food spoiled after the hurricane. I ask the Minister, how can you justify spending money on consultants?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, every decision that's made in the department is scrutinized to make sure that there's good value for money there on behalf of the taxpayer, and in this case it's to make sure that as much frontline service can be provided to our clients as possible. With regards to this particular incident, it's interesting that the member brings it up because I inquired as to whether perhaps we could bring somebody in a term position to cut costs, and in fact the deputy was also looking at this possibility. So I thank you for the question and allow me to bring that out.
The honourable member for Dartmouth South, Portland Valley, on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, when the Minister of Finance released his quarterly report last month, the picture was far from rosy, and he indicated there would be a freeze on hiring consultants. So I asked the Minister of Community Services, are you suggesting that this tender will be cancelled as part of the freeze?
Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to assure the member opposite that there are certain IT functions that have to happen within the department. What I've indicated is that in discussions with the deputy, we are looking at whether it perhaps makes more sense to hire term staff to provide those necessary services that are not able to be delivered from our existing complement of IT staff. Thank you.
The honourable member for Glace Bay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Health. Mr. Speaker, all parties have agreed that the health care costs of long-term care should be paid for by government. Mr. Speaker, the Liberals committed to make this happen. The Liberals committed to make this happen in year one of their mandate, and the Tories agreed that it should happen, but would only commit to implement the change in the year 2007. Now, the NDP, Mr. Speaker, well, Mr. Speaker, they claim to be strong advocates for seniors, but yet they supported and they continue to support a tax cut that will make it impossible for the government to implement that program. Mr. Speaker, my question...
Order, please. Order, please. The honourable member for Glace Bay on his question.
Mr. Speaker, my question for the minister is, isn't it true that if this government rescinded the tax cut, health care costs of long-term care could be covered now without further delay?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, I can tell the honourable member that as a result of the policies of this government in this fiscal year, we will be investing $8.5 million toward the coverage of seniors' long-term care in this province, and that, Mr. Speaker, will be a saving of $4,650 a year for those seniors.
The honourable member for Glace Bay on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, this is just a case of another postponed promise. You've postponed school construction, you've postponed physician hiring, you've postponed bridge and road repair, and you've postponed funds and services for seniors, and soon Nova Scotians are going to postpone your government. Mr. Speaker, a reduction in the tax cut, a cut of 8% instead of 10%, would go a long way towards allowing this government to begin paying the costs today. My question to the minister is, will the minister encourage the premier then to reduce the tax cut to 8% and allow the government to begin to assume the health care costs of long-term care now?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I can tell the honourable member through you that in addition to the $8.5 million that we'll be expending this year, in the next fiscal year we'll be expending $12.7 million toward the cost of seniors' health care in this province. And, Mr. Speaker, that would be about $14,000 less toward their health care costs than they did before April 1st in 2003.
Now, member for Glace Bay on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, hopefully the minister will get it. A reduction in the tax cut could be the difference between seniors receiving the assistance that we all agree they should have today or seniors waiting for years to get it. My question for the minister is, why won't the minister simply encourage the premier, reduce the tax cut today, do the right thing for seniors in this province?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and that brings us to the last stage of the program which we're implementing to cover the cost of seniors' health care in this province, and we will be finished that in 2007, Mr. Speaker, all planned for, all budgeted for, and, Mr. Speaker, it will be delivered.
The honourable member for Halifax Needham.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question for you is to the Minister of Health. Here, here. Mr. Speaker, Hurricane Juan, which had a devastating impact on our province, shut down almost half of Halifax's operating rooms. It's reported that in the Capital Health District, 600 surgeries and 9,000 clinic visits were cancelled after the storm put 2 floors of operating rooms and a number of patient care floors out of commission. Mr. Speaker, my question to the minister is this. When will the surgery backlog due to Hurricane Juan's destructive force be resolved, and what is your government doing in the meantime to get the message out to the 600 or more patients who have had their surgeries cancelled?
The Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And the honourable member brings up a very good question, because I know that people who are waiting for surgeries are indeed concerned, and every opportunity that we have to point out that the Capital Health Authority is working very hard in order to reduce the numbers. And Mr. Speaker, we are awaiting the results of an assessment being done to operating theatres, and by the end of this week we hope to know whether additional operating theatres will be brought on stream. To date, they are back to 75% of capacity. We hope that very soon they can be brought back to full capacity. We are in constant communication with the Health Authority, and Mr. Speaker, we're working very closely with them to resolve this issue and reduce the wait time.
Member Halifax Needham on your first supplementary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Well, the Capital District said in its update, and I'll table a copy for the minister in case he didn't see it, that they are, quote, considering every option to ensure patients' health is not compromised by this delay. Mr. Speaker, my question to the minister is, given the extensive wait times that existed for surgery in the Capital District prior to Hurricane Juan, can the minister tell us what options exactly his government will be exploring to deal with the backlog of surgeries?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And first and foremost, I want to point out to all honourable members of the House that the nature of the surgeries that are involved are primarily related to tertiary care, which is the primary responsibility of the Capital Health Authority. They are the authority in this province who are best prepared to deal with the issue that is presented to them. We work very closely with them, and we have offered any resources that we can to assist them in addressing this. And I can say, Mr. Speaker, that they are working very hard. There is a plan in place, and all patients are being triaged in order to ensure that those with the greatest need are in fact being addressed first.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Needham on your final supplementary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I take from the minister's response that means that there are many people waiting for surgery who cannot be diverted someplace else in the system, which indicates we've got a problem in our system if we have so little capacity to deal with this kind of situation. Mr. Speaker, last week in the House, one of my colleagues raised an example of a surgery patient who was sent home too early. In dealing with the backlogs, I fear other incidents of this nature might occur because of the pressure for beds. So my final question, Mr. Speaker, to the minister is this. What is your commitment to this House that the surgery backlog will be dealt with in a timely fashion without jeopardizing patient care?
Mr. Speaker, we in this government and the department and the Capital Health Authority are committed to working to ensure that the greatest care possible is given to all patients that come forward. That, Mr. Speaker, is the priority, and given the very severe conditions which have resulted as, which came about as a result of the hurricane, we are working even harder, and the people at Capital Health Authority are working even harder to ensure that those needs are met. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member Cole Harwich and Passage.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is also for the Minister of Health. Mr. Speaker, Ralph Scully was a teacher at Eastern Passage Junior High School from 1977 to 2001. And in 2001, he was convicted of indecently assaulting a student between 1977 and 1982 at Eastern Passage Junior High School, and there were more charges pending against him. Mr. Speaker, earlier this year, he was hired by the Southwest Nova District Health Authority as a health care coordinator. So I want to ask the Minister of Health, how can a convicted sex offender be hired by a district health authority in Nova Scotia?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And the situation which the honourable member refers is one which is of concern to everyone. We, in fact, have inquired as to how this would happen, and the fact of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, that letters of reference were, in fact, given to that person. Once the situation was discovered, following the hiring, once the situation was discovered, Mr. Speaker, the person in question was given the option of either resigning or being released, and the result of that is that the person is no longer in the employee of that board.
Member Cole Harwich and Passage on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, Mr. Speaker, a health care coordinator position, my understanding is, has to deal with the public because it's about wellness in the communities throughout Southwest Nova District Health Authority's geographic area. And it's clear that no criminal check was done. Whether or not references were provided, no criminal check was provided in this case. Now, we can't even have someone monitor at lunch at a school without having to have a criminal check signed and checked out by people in this province who are bureaucrats making sure they don't have a criminal record. So my question to the minister is, why did your government not require district health authorities in Nova Scotia to do a criminal check background on any employee who would be working with the public.
Gentleman, Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The extent to which we can embark upon an exhaustive check of every person that applies for a job that works with, there are thousands of people in this province that work with the public. And Mr. Speaker, in this situation, the person received an excellent letter of recommendation from a previous institution that had hired him. Now, Mr. Speaker, the question raised by the honourable member is one which is very interesting, and I will consider it. Thank you.
Member Cole-Harbour, some passage on your final supplementary.
You know, Mr. Speaker, you cannot work in a daycare. You cannot be a teacher's assistant. You cannot monitor students at lunch. Our education system has thousands of employees who work with children, work with the public, and they require criminal background checks. So my final question to the Minister of Health is, Mr. Speaker, what is your department prepared to do in the future to make sure we have proper criminal background checks on employees at district health authorities that work with the public?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I can tell the honourable member through you that that we, in fact, will have discussions with the health authority involved, and it is a matter of concern, very great concern to us, and we want to ensure that we put in place practices that will result in only the best people being hired to deal with people in situations such as the delivery of public health in this province. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member for raising the question.
The honourable member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question for the Minister of Community Services, and it pertains to childcare. Mr. Speaker, the federal government has provided money to enhance daycare in this province, yet this government has all but walked away from its responsibilities in terms of enhancing all components of childcare sector. And proof in point, Mr. Speaker, the family home childcare sector received no additional money for salary enhancements from the new federal funding. To make matters worse, workers employed in the family home childcare sector are using their salaries to pay for food and supplies for the children. And my question to the minister is, can the minister please explain why he has yet to provide any additional financial resources to assist with the cost of supplies for children and to reduce the wage gap between the family home childcare sector and the daycare center?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker's, the member opposite would appreciate those early childhood development monies do come with some expectations and conditions with the federal government. There's been a lot of discussion as to how we would invest them to deliver the maximum benefit for Nova Scotian children. And we are using a lot of consultation to make those decisions. And this is where we are at this point in time. As more monies become available, then perhaps we can address other areas.
Honourable member for Clare on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, governing is all about making choices. This government, Mr. Speaker, has chosen a tax scheme over enhancing the family home childcare sector in this province. That's the choice that they've made. Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm almost certain that the care and the support that family home childcare workers provide to children and their families is worth far more than what an individual will make under this government's $147 million tax scheme. And my question to the minister, Mr. Speaker, will the minister please explain to the family home childcare workers why moving forward with a $147 million tax scheme is more important than providing much-needed additional support to this important daycare sector?
Order, please. The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the member opposite because what he does is he gives me a chance on behalf of the government to point out what my colleagues have been pointing out for the last 3 weeks here, is that running a province involves many decisions, and indeed, as the member I'm sure would concur, that involved more money for health, more money for education, more money for community services, which of course includes child care. And Mr. Speaker, it also involved more money for working Nova Scotian families in the form of a tax cut. We went to the people made their decision. John Ham is still Premier. That is the answer.
The honourable member for Clare on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll try again. Mr. Speaker, what a sad state of affairs when government chooses a tax scheme over enhanced quality care for children enrolled in the family home child care sector in this province. Mr. Speaker, I would say that it's high time that the family home child sector be included on decisions that impact daycare here in Nova Scotia. And my final question to the minister, Mr. Speaker, will the minister please...
Order, please. The honourable member for Clare on his final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My final question to the minister, will the minister please consider adding a representative from the family home child care sector to the round table on daycare so that they can play a more prominent role in the provision of daycare services in this province?
The honourable minister of Community Services.
Mr. Speaker, I am not aware of any correspondence from this sector requesting consideration for their inclusion on the roundtable. However, if they wanted to send in a request, we would look at it at that point in time and make a decision based on its merits.
The honourable member for Halifax Atlantic.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Education. Last night, a group called Save Our High School Immersion Program made a presentation to the Halifax Regional School Board. The group points out that since the Halifax Board divided the French immersion program into 3 parts among 3 schools last year, it has started to deteriorate. They say students have already left the program and course offerings have been pared down to the bare minimum. Parents are very worried about next year. My question to the Minister is, how will the department address this pressing issue?
The honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, the issue of the distribution of the French immersion program at the high school level in HRM was a decision of the board. Actually, for the honourable member to say that the course offerings at a minimum is not correct. There are certainly in each of the 3 sites more than the minimum number of courses that are being offered. However, I do believe at that meeting last night that the board said that they were going to establish a committee to review that decision, and we'll see what happens from that.
Member for Halifax Atlantic on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, they say there are parents and students who value the French immersion program because of the opportunities it provides, and those who came before the school board last night have been proposing a very simple solution. The intent in dividing the program was to strengthen it, but in fact it appears to be weakening. They hope, as an interim measure, to see the French immersion program at St. Pat's and JL Ilsley recombined. My question is, has the government refused to play any role in this situation because of a lack of real commitment to the French immersion program throughout the province?
The honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, the move to spread the French high school immersion program among the 3 schools, St. Pat's, Halifax West, and JL Ilsley, the former city of Halifax, was part of a long-term plan developed by the board to make French immersion available in schools closer to where students live. And they did that this year. And as a matter of fact, in 2002, it was parents who told the French Immersion Review Committee that they wanted French immersion closer to their homes.
The honourable member for Halifax Atlantic on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, I do understand that the motivation was to strengthen the French immersion program throughout the school board. However, I feel that it is a very important component of education in the Nova Scotian system, and it is perhaps something to which the province should be turning its attention to ensure the situation does not repeat itself. Will you commit today to take action to ensure the protection of this provincial French immersion and language services?
The honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, the French immersion in French language services in the schools of Nova Scotia is protected right now, and it is clearly one of the important facets of education in this province, and is recognized so by the Department of Education.
The honourable member for Annapolis.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Health. Healthcare is the #1 issue in the riding of Annapolis, Mr. Speaker. Today at Soldiers Memorial Hospital, we have 11 residents in acute care beds awaiting for long-term care placement. Could the minister tell the people of Annapolis why a tax scheme is more important than opening up long-term beds so that the acute care beds would be available for the residents of my riding?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What I can tell the honourable member through you is that we are working very hard and working with the DHA to ensure that those long-term care beds are made available to alleviate the situation with respect to acute care beds. That process is actively being pursued by both the department and the DHA.
The honourable member for Annapolis on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Physician recruitment is also, in the emergency room closure at Soldiers Memorial Hospital, is also a concern to our residents. Could the minister please explain to the residents of Annapolis why a tax scheme is better than not having access to a family doctor?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, the honourable member should know that the recruitment process with respect to physicians is an ongoing process. Through the efforts of the DHA and the Department of Health, they are actively being recruited throughout this, throughout North America and internationally. And Mr. Speaker, we will continue to do that when candidates are found who are available to come. Mr. Speaker, there are no financial impediments to keeping them from coming to this province and practicing.
The honourable member for Annapolis on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, I just want to tell the minister that the recruitment process is not working for the riding of Annapolis. Yesterday, I outlined a case of Rick Laird, who is 46 years old. He is in a hospital bed and has been told by government the only option for him is a nursing home. In my opinion, Mr. Speaker, that is short-sighted, because a fully funded, self-managed care program would reduce the use of hospital beds, long-term care beds, and leads to savings in the system. Could the minister please tell Mr. Laird and this House why a $147 million tax scheme is more important than a self-managed care program?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, I can tell the honourable member that despite the fact that the previous government had cut 1,500 hospital beds in this province, we in fact have continued to put additional money into health care year after year. We are increasing the level of funding for health care in this province. And Mr. Speaker, as the funds increase, then additional services such as those referenced by the honourable member will become available.
The honourable member for Hants East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question will be through you to the Minister of Education. Mr. Speaker, on December 23rd, the Colchester and East Hants bookmobile will make its last run. This service has delivered books to residents of rural communities for 53 years. The program is being shut down because it doesn't have the $200,000 necessary to replace its aging bus. So, Mr. Speaker, I ask the Minister of Education, why is this valuable program being allowed to disappear?
Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, I don't think there's anybody in this legislature that appreciates libraries more than me, having lived for some years with a person who worked in that library. And I get regular reminders about that. The issue is, Mr. Speaker, that was a decision made by the board of the Colchester East Hants Regional Library. It was a decision they made. We were not consulted in that.
The honourable member for Hants East on your first supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the minister can show some leadership after question period and pick up the phone and tell them that any funding they need for that, he'd be willing to put it into place. Mr. Speaker, not everyone has the means to get to a library. Even if satellite branches are opened up in Hants East and Colchester, even if satellite branches are opened up in Hants East and Colchester, the bookmobile had 477 members and a circulation of over 25,000 books last year. It was well used and much appreciated in my constituency, but now it is yet another service to rural communities being cut. So I want to ask the minister, what good does he see in cutting this service?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, the bookmobile provided a long and distinguished service to the residents of Colchester East Hants, as it did in other parts of the province. One of the things of modern society, and that board is not alone, is that the bookmobile is a service that I guess it's being diminished across this province. Mr. Speaker, like everything else, it's a matter of priorities, and clearly the Colchester East Hants Regional Library Board, who made that decision, felt that the money that was being spent on the bookmobile services could be better expended in other ways, including perhaps enhancing the satellite library that's in your constituency.
The member for Hants East on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I can't understand why the minister, who is himself an educator, would take the view of his colleagues and blame this on a board. This board comes to the province for funding, and they need funding for this service, Mr. Speaker. So I want to ask the minister, does he recognize the value of the service, and will he fund it appropriately to ensure its survival?
Hear, hear. Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, this government does recognize the value of public libraries, and if the honourable member will go back and remember that my comments upon being pointed to this portfolio included the recognition and the support of our government for the public library service in this province. Mr. Speaker, there is currently a review committee ongoing to talk about the funding for public libraries, and clearly when that report comes in, every consideration will be given to it. And if you're going to ask me the question, do I think there is enough money available for public libraries in this province, the answer is no, because there's not enough money really for most any other thing that relates.
Order, please. The member Cape Breton South.
Mr. Speaker, my question is to the minister responsible for Cisco. Mr. Speaker, in March 2000, the province added $250 million to the provincial debt for the cleanup of the Sydney Steel site. Since then, Mr. Speaker, Ernst & Young have been managing the cleanup with about 15 managers when they were originally brought in to liquidate the assets only. Phillips Environmental, Mr. Speaker, which has since gone bankrupt, was charged with the actual demolition. Mr. Speaker, the contract that Phillips had was flipped over without a tender to a new company run by former Phillips employees called Murray Demolition, which registered with joint stocks in 2002, probably for that express purpose. Mr. Speaker, another Crown corporation called Sydney Environmental is charged with security and in the running of an operation that sells slag. My question to the minister, Mr. Speaker, is why is this government failing to tell the people what exactly is going on as a large group of private and public companies spend $250 million of taxpayers' money?
The Honourable Deputy Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased that the honourable member opposite acknowledges that the cleanup is progressing and it's been done very well and competently, and Mr. Speaker is within budget.
The honourable member Cape Breton South on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, we know the cleanup is progressing. We're just wondering where the benefit is going. Mr. Speaker, Tom Traves is the current president of Cisco, and he used to work for